Forced hysterectomies are being performed on migrant women at an ICE detention center in Georgia. Hey guys, this is Double D from the Entitled Millennials podcast, and this is my Thinking Out Loud series. By now, I'm sure all of you guys have already seen the apparent ICE whistleblower that has come out saying that at a detention center in Irwin County, Georgia, ICE has been performing forced hysterectomies on migrant women. This whistleblower, a nurse by the name of Dawn Wooten, has come out and said that there's been jarring medical neglect at the facility in Georgia. She has gone on to say that there has not been proper testing for COVID-19. There has not been proper sanitation. There's complete medical malpractice and neglect going on at these facilities. They are overcrowded, something that we've already known. But coming out of this whistleblower's report is perhaps one of the most disturbing things we've heard about this ongoing crisis at the border, with migrants being detained, with families being separated, people that have been, if not on paper for all intensive purposes, American citizens being detained and then shipped out of the country. Now we're hearing that at this particular facility, there was a doctor that was performing hysterectomies on these migrant women without their consent. A lot of them went under the knife, not understanding what sort of procedure they were getting. They were having ovaries removed, part or the entirety of the uterus, with no knowledge. Many of them didn't even speak English. I have a couple of excerpts here from a few different articles that I've read regarding this case, and I want to share them with you guys. Miss Wooten alleged that one doctor removed the wrong ovary from a young detainee, and that, quote unquote, everybody he sees has a hysterectomy. Now, this goes along with reports that we have already heard over the years that have leaked out from detainees that have been in custody of ICE about abuse. We've heard of children going missing. A lot of people are alleging that those children are ending up in sex trafficking rings. We've heard about all kinds of terrible conditions, a lack of food, a lack of warm clothing, and now obviously with COVID going on, we've heard of a rampant spread of COVID with little to no testing going on. But in this particular case, Dawn Wooten came out, this nurse came out, but she also had quotes, and other detainees from this particular facility came out talking about some of their own experiences. And I have another quote from one of these detainees that said, this was interviewed by Project South, likened the center to a quote unquote, an experimental concentration camp, adding, it was like they were experimenting on our bodies. Ms. Wooten went on to say that common practice for the sick call nurse to shred medical requests from detained immigrants. Now, guys, there's a lot more coming out of these different articles that I've seen, some from CNN, from The Times. This one, some of those quotes I just shared from were from the BBC. And when I heard about this, I knew I had to make a video about it. I've shared with you guys some of the basic information that's coming out. Obviously, when we have a whistleblower situation like this, whatever and whenever it may be, like in the case of Edward Snowden, we learn more and more as the days and weeks and months go on. And right now, it's pretty minimal what we're hearing. It's pretty minimal what has been released from these allegations to the mainstream media, to the press. When I heard about this, I just had this overwhelming sense of dread. And I don't know if you guys remember this. I don't know who's on this channel now that was watching back when we first started doing the show a year ago. But I remember on episode 4, when we first started hearing about some of these ICE detention centers and the overcrowding and the children being locked in cages, some of the speculation that children were disappearing and ending up in sex trafficking rings, just all the general abuse that we were hearing about coming from ICE and from the Department of Homeland Security. I remember on one episode of the podcast, episode 4, I went on a rant talking about how terrible this was and how much it mirrors the sort of actions that we saw occurring in Nazi Germany leading up to World War II and then obviously during World War II. And when I was thinking about making this video, I remembered this World War II documentary that I watched that was really powerful. It was called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. I believe it was a 2-part series. Each episode was about an hour and a half. And we all are familiar with the sort of atrocities that the Nazis committed. But one of the things from that documentary and from my studies of the Third Reich that struck me the most, that disgusted me the most, was the forced sterilization that was occurring underneath the Third Reich. In that time, when the Nazis were in power, they obviously had a eugenics program. We've all heard about the Holocaust, concentration camps. But something that's less spoken about is these forced sterilizations. Now, what would happen is if you were a regular German citizen, if you weren't Jewish, if you weren't some of these groups that were immediately marked into forced labor camps and into just outright being murdered, it could be determined that you, either from your family tree, or I honestly, I don't even know how they would make these. It's just a disgusting thing about how they'd make these sort of inferences. But it could be determined that you were still genetically unfit, maybe not to exist, but to be part of the Reich gene pool. And you'd be going about your day, and you'd check your mail, and you would have a letter from the Reich government saying that you had to show up at this day, on this date, at this time, and receive a sterilization. And something about that, all the horrible things that we've heard about the Nazis, that just marked me in such a way. I watched that documentary, I believe, when I was 12 or 13, and I still think about it on occasion today. And then I hear about this whistleblower, this nurse, Dawn Wooten, coming out, saying that under federal custody of the Department of Homeland Security, ICE has a doctor in this particular facility, and who knows if it's happening elsewhere? Who knows what else is happening? How many of these camps are there? But our government is either sanctioning or allowing forced sterilizations to happen on migrant women. This is happening in the United States. If you weren't already disturbed or disturbed enough by the fact that they were taking people that had already lived in this country for some of them decades, separating families, putting children in cages, children disappearing, the filth, the overcrowding, the despair. If you already weren't shook enough by that, now we have this. The United States government is perpetuating forced sterilizations at detention centers. Now, these women were not given any good reason as to why these sterilizations would happen. ICE has come out and DHS has come out and said that we should be, quote unquote, skeptical of allegations that don't have any backing. Maybe. But this isn't the first time we've heard of abuses within ICE custody. And my heart is telling me that this is true. Why would this nurse come out and say this? This is something beyond egregious to lie about. I want you guys to think about this for a minute. Think about everything that's happening. The fires, the Black Lives Matter, the police killings, the secret police on the streets, the rigged primary, the very brazen attempt now to rig the November election, the corruption. Look at the society we're living in. This isn't a game anymore. This isn't some distant fairyland thing happening, American war crimes happening in some fucking forgotten desert in Iraq or Afghanistan. This is happening here in your country. Your tax dollars are paying for women to be sterilized. I don't know what else you need to hear or what else you need to see that you are living in the evil empire. This is unacceptable, guys. On the podcast, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. I'm not sure if I'll release this first or if I'll release the podcast from this week first, but on the podcast, Johnny and I were talking about all these things, but, the rigged elections, Trump talking about brazenly attempting for a third term, Roger Stone saying that if Trump doesn't win, he should declare martial law. But in particular, this incident, this leaked report of these sterilizations, of this atrocity. There's no other word for it. This is a fucking atrocity being perpetuated by the hands of your government, of our government. I had a conversation with one of my DSA comrades last night. my comrade Mandy, and hearing about this put me in a certain mood, and I decided to watch Schindler's List. And her and I were talking, and I was in if you've seen that movie, you know how much of an emotional state it can put you in. And I remember, or I just was talking to her, and I said, we're living in the build-up to the exact same times as what happened in the Third Reich. It's happening here now. It's been happening for a while, but it's starting to speed up. And I told her, Mandy, when the time comes and the curtain comes down and the fascist state is 100% in power and the mask is gone and there is no more, mirage of democracy or rule of law, it's going to be up to people like you and I to help people and to save lives and to do something to stop these sort of atrocities. And they're already happening now. But my message I want to leave you guys with on this video is that if things keep going the way they're going, there's going to come a time when you're going to be called on to help, that maybe I will be called on to help. And I hope maybe you'll remember back to this video, and despite how afraid you are and despite the fact that you might be at risk, that if the opportunity presents itself, that you will do everything that you can to help people. Because it's coming, guys. It's already here. And when the time comes where you have a choice to run or to do the right thing, I hope you'll think back to this video and make the choice to try and save somebody's life. But anyway, guys, I didn't even really know how I wanted this video to go when I sat down. I just wanted to give you the bare facts of what's come out, some of these quotes, and to give you some of my thoughts and feelings on it. And I'm just heartbroken to even hear about this, man. It makes me sick. I'll try to give you guys an update on this one, maybe another Thinking Out Loud video, or we'll touch on it, I'm sure, in next week's podcast as more information comes out. So until then, guys, be safe, and I love you. All right. Bye.
I don't feel any pain. I'm staring into the rain. I don't feel anything.